Well, hey guys, it's Mitch here, and I am really excited about the opportunity as a lot of you have asked me questions and have asked me when was this going to start. And what I wanted to do was kind of bring to you an introductory video about where a friend of mine and myself are going to go with this. And so what I want to do is introduce my friend, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of a background introduction on myself, and then we're going to tell you a little bit about where we're going with this. Okay? Most of you know me. Most of you know who I am, what I do for a living. Most of you know that I have come out of the ministry world, so to speak. And so this is a very different kind of Bible study that I think once Ray and I begin this process, I hope it's something that will bring a little bit of knowledge to you. But my biggest desire and my biggest heart with this is that it stokes a little bit of a fire inside of you to think about what it is that you've always been told, what it is you've always experienced, whether you're from the church or you're not from the church, or whether you're from outside of the church or whatever. But the whole goal is to get you thinking, okay? So again, you know me as Mitch, the guy up above, the good-looking guy up above with the New York hat on. That's Mr. Ray Luke, who and Ray, say hi to everybody.
How you guys doing?
All right, my man. Ray is down in, well, it's not sunny Miami today. He's getting a little bit of rain down there, man. But and we got a little bit of rain up here too. So, but guys and ladies, you don't know how thrilled I am and honored to have Ray here with me, because he has become not only a teacher, an instructor, but a very, very dear friend. And so I think as we move along through this process, you're going to be amazed at not only the knowledge that Ray has, but the experiences that he has had through life, getting from where he was to where he is now. So a little bit about myself. A lot of you know that I was in vocational ministry for a while. I came out of Atlanta. Right now I live in Northwest Atlanta with my wife and my kids. And I've been with the sheriff's office now for a while, almost 12 years. But there was about a 15 to 18 year kind of span where I was in ministry when I came out of it, or when I was in Atlanta. I got involved in ministry back in the early 90s. I didn't actually begin, I guess you would call it, a faith walk until I was about 31. So I didn't go the normal path. My path was a little bit different. I was a little bit older. My wife kind of got me involved with it. It was an exciting journey for me because the people that I associated with and the pastor that I got involved with he was really a cool guy. He was, if you had to have a picture of somebody in the encyclopedia or on Wikipedia of what a pastor looks like, Larry was that guy. Baptist, Southern Baptist. I grew up there teaching youth ministry, teaching Sunday school, did youth ministry, went on to seminary, did my seminary work. But as I progressed through this process of programming, learning how the church works, but also beginning to think theologically, I began to see some red flags, some gray areas, I guess would be a better word for it. And in those gray areas, the answers were not really, they weren't really satisfying me, as far as things were being said one way, but I was reading them differently when I would read scripture. Like anybody else, I grew up on an NIV, New American Standard Version. I had no idea about the context of scripture. I didn't know really much about the language of Hebrew. I didn't know much about the where it came from. And I would always hear people say things like, Jesus is Jewish. And as I began to read through some of the scriptures and began doing some of my studies in seminary, there would always be this cloud out there. And this cloud was like, he's Jewish, but it stopped right there. And he's Jewish, but here's what he really means to say. here's what Paul really means to say. And so that just began to kind of work through my head. Well, back in about 2005, I had an opportunity with a group of guys to go up to Michigan and hear a pastor, a young pastor, in front who had just started, who had just planted this church, an evangelical church. I believe he opened the doors with about 3,500 people that first weekend he opened up. And his first year of teaching that congregation, he taught through the book of Leviticus. And I'm like, why? You know, why would you take people and go and start? Because I was always told you started with the book of John. You started with Matthew. You look at the person of Jesus and maybe get into Acts and learn about the church and so forth. But I was like, why would he start with the book of Leviticus? But then I began understanding and communicating and hearing dialogue about why he did that. And he began using terminology that I had never heard before. Terminology about the mother language. Terminology about the first 2/3 of the Bible that we didn't really spend a whole lot of time in. As an evangelical, we were always over there in that last third of the Bible. When I became ordained as a pastor, and one of my gifts was a New Testament that included Proverbs and Psalms. And so it was just completely separate. So this really raised a lot of flags about just the whole idea, well, what happened to the first 2/3 of the Bible? Is it not relevant? Well, that's when I began, a good friend of mine by the name of Derek Lehman, and some of you may know him. Derek was a Messianic Jewish rabbi, and he began to work with me and talk with me a little bit about the language, the culture, the people, the fact that, yes, Jesus was Jewish, but he was Jewish. It wasn't that he was Jewish and then he stopped and did the Sermon on the Mount, and this was all revolutionary new stuff. Then I began to realize who Jesus spoke to most of the time. Then I began to realize that Paul never gave up his Jewishness. Paul, the writer of his letters, Paul had no idea his letters were going to be canonized. These were personal letters to these churches. And so a lot of things just were becoming unsettled. So back along about 2006, 2007, I began this journey to look back into the original context of Scripture, the original context of the Bible, the people of the Bible, the language. Because everybody, like I said, I realized when I went through seminary, I used the New American Standard Edition of the Bible. But that's a translation. Okay? That is an English translation of an interpretation through a particular lens. So as long as when I was in front of those seminary professors and teachers, as long as I was telling them what they wanted to hear through that particular lens, I was good to go.
Good to go.
I didn't realize there were other lenses and other, viewpoints out there. So this, again, led me down this path to get a burning desire to learn about what we call the Jewish Jesus. Not the American Jesus, not the Western Jesus, not the Bible Belt Jesus, not the middle of Georgia Jesus, but the Jesus of Scriptures. And that Jesus was, is, and always will be Jewish. And then I began asking myself the question, well, why does that matter? I mean, what's the importance to that? Well, that's the reason he said the things that he said. That's the reason we see the Sermon on the Mount is not something new. These are sayings out of Deuteronomy and Leviticus. These are sayings that he grew up on as a child, as a Jewish child. These are his interpretations. These are just like any other rabbi's interpretations. So with all of that said, that really messed me up. Okay? I mean, that messed me up big time. And so I began to have to look for ways to try to figure out, what does this mean? And that's what led me to some voices that began to help clarify that. And we'll talk about that as we get further along into this Bible study. And as Ray said, as Ray is going to tell you, I'm going to let him introduce himself and let him introduce what the Bible study is about and where we're going to go with it. But we're going to give you guys some resources as we move along to help you if you want to go look and investigate this any further. We're going to give you opportunity as we move along to ask questions in the comment boxes. So, and this will be put up on several different platforms, so you'll have an opportunity to access it when you need to. I'm excited about it. So, Ray, I'm going to turn it over to the man with the face, okay? And the man that just, he has become a tight brother with me, and I love you, man. I appreciate you, Ray. So just if you would introduce yourself and let them know where we headed, bro.
Thank you, Mitch. So yeah, guys, like my good friend and brother Mitch was saying, I'm from Miami, Florida, born and raised. My parents are from Cuba, and they got here to the States, to Miami in 1980, and I was born in 1981. Born and raised in Miami. Was a basketball player all through high school. I played high school, I played college, and I played some professional basketball for about 4 years before I tore my ACL in 2007. In 2007, well, I'll tell you a little bit from my younger days. I wasn't raised really religious, but from a young age, I can remember my mom. She became a Christian. She was Catholic at first, and she became a Protestant Christian. We come from like an evangelical Pentecostal background, and I remember going to church when I was younger. But by the time I got to high school, I kind of got away from all those things. So I really didn't know much about the Bible, about God, about Jesus or anything like that. I just knew that I wasn't an atheist by the time I ever really thought about those things in high school. But I got further and further away from all those things until my injury. My injury in 2007 kind of, set me back on the ground, and my journey started at that moment. My journey in faith, it's a lot to talk about, but I started my journey then, and I really started to take a serious look. I'd never read the Bible till that time, and I began to pray, and I began to read the Bible. Started going to church by myself, and with me and my wife and my kids, we went to Calvary Chapel for many years. Great bunch of folks there at the Calvary Chapel. I still love those guys. Some of the most caring and kind people, and very strong, with a strong faith background. I was all the way sold out, for God, His will at that time, as I saw it, with all the things that had happened to me at that moment. And so I continued to investigate a lot of these things. I always had questions. I always had questions to the pastors. I would drive them crazy, the pastors and the elders. I would drive them crazy with the pastors because, at that time, in the very beginning, I think I was like studying all throughout the entire day. I would study all day long because I was nothing like that I was 27 years old, and nothing like that had ever happened in my life before. And so I had always been very committed to the things that I had put my heart to, my mind to, like, for example, basketball. And so when that happened to it, I was like, I've put my all to the things of this world, how much more so would I put into knowing the Creator who created me, who's giving me a family, I'm healthy, all these things. So I went at it with that type of mentality. And similar to like my brother Mitch was saying, I began to have a lot of questions that I wasn't getting satisfactory answers, not from the pastor. It was sort of like I would ask a question, and it was sort of like, well, this is just how it is. But a lot of background wasn't given to me. I wasn't satisfied, so I continued to research. Fast forward a little bit. I was flying out to conferences. I never went to ministry. I never went to seminary or anything like that. But I was flying out to conferences. one of my people who made a big had a big effect on my life and on my spiritual path at that time was a pastor by the name of Dave Hunt. Maybe some of you know him. He's out in Bend, Oregon. His ministry is called the Berean Call. And this man, I mean, he had a huge impact on me. He was very, very pro-Israel. And these were the beginnings that kind of influenced me and got me to learn more about the Middle East, about Israel. Because until that time, I didn't know much except, like Mitch said, that Jesus was Jewish. But to me, Jesus could have been Jewish. Jesus could have been a Mexican. Jesus could have been whatever. And that's how his Jewishness played in my life. I mean, it could have been anything. And so I didn't really know what it meant that Jesus is Jewish. So in my education at that time, everything seemed to be guiding me closer and closer to the Jewish people, to learning from, Jewish pastors, etc. And then I began to study. This was fundamental for me. I began to study not the Jesus of how I knew him as a Christian, the Jesus of faith, meaning the Jesus who this faith Christianity is all based about, but about the historical man, Jesus of Nazareth, and what that meant. I mean, that sent shockwaves very early in my research of the historical man, because now everything was grounded. To me, it wasn't like everything was up in the faith, up in the air. We had to oblige by certain doctrinal faiths within Christianity, and you have to accept this, and that, and the other. And then another denomination, they didn't accept those exact creeds, so they had another group and another denomination here, there, whatever. Now everything started to be on solid ground for me. I mean, I began to learn that Jesus was not a Christian. I mean, that right there, when I heard that Jesus is not a Christian, I mean, it turned my world upside down until that time, all the education that I had. Because we look at Jesus in that way, whether you know it or not. We look at him as a Christian because our theology is what guides us throughout the entire Bible. And like how Mitch says, I mean, I had been going to church for a very, very long time, and I had 90% of all sermons that I had ever heard were coming from the New Testament. So I began to see that Christians, for the most part, they view the Bible through the lens of the New Testament, and they read the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, they read it through that lens. And it's just not letting the words of the New Testament speak for itself, but through the lens of the theology of Christianity. Right. The moment I started to unpackage those things, I mean, it shook my entire world. And now Jesus became real to me. I mean, not that the Jesus of Christianity is not real. I mean, it was standing on solid ground. I almost felt like an archaeologist, it was explosive. And Jesus is not a Christian. If Jesus is not a Christian, then what is he? Well, Jesus is actually a religious Jew, and he never came to start a new religion. He was well founded on the scriptures, the Hebrew Bible, because that's another thing. I didn't know, or maybe subconsciously I understood that when we would hear the New Testament characters speaking here and there, and they would say certain things about the scriptures, I thought that the New Testament was included. But these men didn't own a New Testament. It wasn't written till many years after the death of Jesus, after the death of the apostles, was it actually codified and written down, because amongst Jewish people, first of all, they were eyewitnesses. They didn't need a New Testament. Second of all, oral tradition is very, very strong in the Middle East, especially among the Jewish people. Right. So as, things continue to, get further away from the historical occurrences, then these things began to be codified and written down for the next generations. So those things were big to me. Jesus is a religious Jew who stayed within Judaism. Think about that for a second. I mean, that's mind-blowing. because maybe about 200 to 300 years after Jesus' death, all the doctrines, all the theology that Christianity holds sacred and dear became codified, not by Jesus' apostles who were Jewish within Judaism, not by their disciples who were also Jewish and stayed within Judaism, but by non-Jewish believers in Jesus who separated themselves from the faith of Jesus.
Yes.
This might sound kind of controversial, but I'm not talking about anything that you can't look up for yourself. None of the Jewish apostles or Jewish believers were invited to the Council of Nicaea. None of them.
Right.
These things were brought down, and all these different theologies, and even in Protestant among the Protestant churches and denominations, they have taken with them many beliefs, doctrines that are from the Catholic Church. The majority of them. I mean, Martin Luther reformed a lot, but he didn't reform enough.
Exactly.
And so this Bible study, okay, this Bible study is gonna, we're not trying to brainwash anyone. We're not trying to force any views on anyone. All we're trying to do is lay the information there, and people are more than welcome to do their own research. We call people to do that.
Yes.
My brother Mitch said, I'm no teacher. I mean, I am a fellow student just like Mitch, and the way we found each other is part of divine providence.
Yeah.
And we always talk on the phone, we share on Facebook, we study together. And so we were like, man, we had got a very fundamental text of the Jewish people, okay, from Judaism. And we were like, you know what, we should study this, because when we read this text, it's called Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avos. Ethics of the Fathers is a fundamental text about the fundamentals of the Hebrew Bible, of ethics and morals that are within the Bible. And so we were like, we should study it together. We were like, Mitch, let's study together. Fine. How about we know what we should do? We should record it and share it with people, because this is beautiful. We're not supposed to get all this information for ourselves, but we're supposed to share these things so that once someone did that with me, and I'm forever eternally grateful, as Mitch, as you are, I'm sure. And we want to do the same thing. It's actually part of the commission. We call ourselves disciples of Jesus, right? And to be a disciple, you have to be one who memorizes his words, who lived how he lived, and follow his footsteps. And this is what we want to do with this Bible study. So the Bible study, it's called From Rome to Jerusalem, a journey from the faith about Jesus to the faith of Jesus. A great subtle difference there. Mitch, so do you have any words that you have there?
Yes, Ray. Let me add just two things. And man, you put that so well. Let me make something real clear, that as Ray and I progress in this, there will be a lot of really, really amazing information that will be brought out that, to me, I'm blown away that the Christian world just lays it aside. But let me make something clear. This is not going to be a bashing of the church philosophically, or how church is done, or what churches do to get people into the door. This is not what this is about. This is, I hope, a history lesson. I hope it's a lesson that, like we have said, will spark a flame like it did in me, to go and do your homework.
Yes.
If you say that the whole Bible is scripture that is a part of your foundation, well, then you need to know the whole Bible. If you say that Jesus is Jewish, then you need to understand the ramifications of that when he teaches and what his dialogue is. And so I just want to make it real clear that this is not one of those where I'm going to say, well, this church is bad because they do
Not
this,
at all.
because there's a lot of great people out there. I came
Exactly.
up in a church full of great people. Ray has been involved with a lot of churches with great people. What we hope to do is to begin to build a bridge from the truths of Scripture to where Christianity sets today. And whatever Christianity looks like today, however that is, we want to build a bridge so that you have an opportunity to grow and understand the Jesus that we've come to know there. So we're going to try to do this weekly. We're going to try to go through a portion of the book weekly and put this up. And like I said, we will do our very best to answer all the questions that you might have in the comment sections. We'll also have an opportunity. We will share some resources with the book that we're coming out of. But most of all, I want you to know that this is being done out of love. This is being done out of concern that the theology of Christianity for 2,000 years has just, it took a veer and it has stayed that veer. And what we would like to try to do is to let you know that there is a lot of truth out there that a lot of people, if they could get their hands on and get it from here to here, as you will see with the ethics of the fathers. I had no idea this existed, and this is some of the most amazing teaching there is out there about living with each other, about how God set up this divine plan for people to live together. So again, thank you guys for tuning in today. Ray, do you have anything else you want to add at this point?
Nope, no. We're very excited to take this journey, and like my brother Mitch said, this journey is about making a bridge, and this bridge goes from Rome to Jerusalem, and we want you guys to partake of this journey with us.
Yeah. Yes, and we want it to be fun. We want it to be challenging so that you can ask the people around you questions. You can ask people that are called teachers in your lives. We want you to be able to know where to go and to truly understand that from Genesis 1:1 all the way through to Revelation, it is a smooth process. It doesn't go, stop, pick up, and then go again. It is a smooth process. And there is an amazing rabbi in the very center of that, Jesus, who is just absolutely the center of our lives. And so we'll get into that as we go. So we are going to wish you guys a great rest of the day wherever you're at. Looking forward to any questions, comments, or whatever that you have. Ray, my man, thank you for participating. I appreciate you. You know how much I love you, man, and looking forward to getting to know a lot of you other people out there as well as we move on with this, okay?
Love you too, Mitch, and many blessings to everyone. And like Mitch said, man, we're welcoming all questions and inquiries, and I hope you guys enjoy this study.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, guys.